In the tangled web of history, there is a reason 12 of the wealthiest families in Robertson County, Tennessee, decided to change their surnames and scatter across 4 states between 1847 and 1860. They were running from something that was not a plague or a war, but a woman. Her name was Eliza Harwell, and what destroyed those powerful families had nothing to do with the superstition surrounding her mismatched eyes, but with the secrets she witnessed, understood, and eventually used. What makes this story so disturbing isn't that Eliza Harwell had any special power. It is that she had something these men never expected an enslaved woman to have. Access to their secrets, the intelligence to understand what those secrets meant, and eventually the opportunity to speak. Robertson County, Tennessee, in 1824, was a prosperous agricultural region built on the backs of forced labor. The Harwell Plantation, sitting on 800 acres of prime bottom, was managed by Colonel James Harwell, a county magistrate who hosted political gatherings where influential deals were made. The plantation was impressive, with 73 enslaved people working the land. On a March morning in 1824, a child was born in the cabin row. The midwife, Ruth, had never seen eyes like the infant girl's. One pale gray-blue, the other deep brown. The condition, heterochromia, etiges, was viewed locally with superstition. Marked that meant she could see spirits or brought bad fortune. Sarah, the child's 24-year-old mother, who had survived the Middle Passage, recognized the subtle danger in the old woman's fear. She named the girl Eliza, a strong name, and resolved to raise her normally. But Eliza was developing a gift that went beyond superstition. From an early age, she possessed an uncanny ability to recall conversations, word for word, remember names and faces, and notice patterns others missed. age 6. She understood that this perfect memory, this gift, made her different in ways that transcended her unusual eyes. The summer of 1830 brought a devastating drought. Crops struggled, tempers flared, and enslaved people worked even longer hours under the merciless, unrelenting sun. At age 6, Eliza was moved to the main house to work under Martha, the head housekeeper, who immediately recognized Eliza's dangerous gift: perfect memory. Eliza could recall entire conversations and menus weeks later. Martha, understanding that excessive intelligence in an enslaved person was a threat to the system, sought out Eliza's mother, Sarah. "That child remembers too much," Martha warned. "She need to see more than area or she going to draw attention she don't want." Sarah painfully taught Eliza the art of appearing less capable than she was, knowing it was a necessary survival skill. In August 1830, Colonel Harwell hosted a dinner for 11 influential associates, plantation owners, judges, and merchants. The men drank heavily, their voices growing louder and their words less guarded. Eliza, small and easily overlooked, moved through the dining room, refilling glasses. She overheard Edward Vance boasting about stealing property from a widow through foreclosed collateral. She heard Judge Thornton laugh as he described dismissing a case from a newly freed black man, trying to reclaim his 3 children, explaining, "Have to maintain order, maintain the system." She heard Colonel Harwell himself detailing a complex scheme to manipulate the county assessor and use coordinated lowball offers, manufactured debts, and strategic foreclosures to steal prime farmland from struggling small farmers for our consortium. Then, Eliza heard something else that froze her. The men were discussing Grace Thornhill, a free woman of color who had inherited 40 acres of prime farmland. They were plotting how to acquire her property. In that moment, Eliza realized that the law and the system were not for justice, but for maintaining power structures that benefited these men. The powerful men's target was Grace Thornhill, a free woman of color who owned 40 acres of prime farmland. They casually discussed using Marcus Pettiford to question the legitimacy of her father's will, Judge Thornton to challenge her freedom papers based on small irregularities, or Edward Vance to create debts that would force a sale. Colonel Harwell calmly stated, "She'll sell eventually, or circumstances will create opportunities for acquisition through other means." 2 months later, Grace Thornhill's farmhouse burned to the ground on a cold October night, killing her. Her land was quickly sold at auction to pay fabricated debts, and Edward Vance purchased the property for less than half its value. Eliza, at 6 years old, remembered every word of the plot. She understood the core truth of the system. Power wasn't just about ownership and law. It was about information, leverage, and knowing things that powerful men wanted to keep hidden. She'd become an unintentional archive of corruption. From 1830 to 1838, Elisa grew up, her perfect memory a growing concern. In the cold winter of 1833, Martha, the head housekeeper, died of pneumonia. Before her death, Martha gave 9-year-old Elisa a final warning. You remember everything, but you gotta learn what to say and what to keep silent. Promise me you'll be smart enough to survive until you can be free. By 1835, Colonel Harwell noticed Eliza's ability and, in a dangerous display of arrogance, began deliberately stationing her in rooms where he held sensitive conversations. He used her memory as a parlor trick for guests, asking her to repeat verbatim details of land cases and legal precedents. He did not realize that Eliza was organizing everything she heard into a vast mental ledger tracking real and fabricated debts, and documenting court cases where judges received instructions from the very men who controlled Robertson County. The 12 men who regularly gathered at the Harwell plantation formed an informal, secret arrangement they called the Springfield Association. This consortium included Colonel James Harwell, magistrate and coordinator, Judge Benjamin Thornton, court control, Edward Vansland, speculator, William Greer, county land office controller, Jefferson Cunningham, bank owner, and Alexander Dodden, slave auction manager. Through coordinated manipulation, they controlled every aspect of Robertson County's economy and legal system. They maintained impeccable public reputations while ruthlessly destroying anyone who threatened their interests. Eliza knew all of this: the fabricated debts, the biased rulings, the altered deeds, because she had heard them plan and celebrate their corruption in the belief that an enslaved person could not understand or remember. By 1838, Colonel Harwell, out of arrogance or need, began using Eliza's perfect memory to verify details and gain an advantage over his own associates, asking her to repeat their private conversations verbatim. Eliza realized that this unusual gift had given her something priceless, value beyond her labor. Information was a form of power that could eventually be turned into leverage, maybe even freedom. She began to build a mental archive, understanding that the path to freedom required tearing down the entire structure designed to keep her enslaved. The year 1841 marked a turning point. Colonel Harwell's health rapidly declined from a persistent cough. His ambitious, educated, but reckless son, James Harwell Jr., 26, returned home from Nashville to prepare to take over the plantation and his father's central position in the Springfield Association. Elisa, now 17, watched the younger Harwell, recognizing that his desperation to prove himself worthy made him vulnerable and reckless. As James Harwell Jr. took over for his ailing father, his ambition and recklessness created tension within the Springfield Association. While presiding over a meeting in 1843, James Jr. carelessly suggested they lease Eliza's services to other members for reliable, unwritten record-keeping. The older associates, Edward Vance and Marcus Pedford, were alarmed. "You're talking about teaching a slave to understand she has value beyond her labor," Vance warned. Pedford quietly stated, "The question is what she plans to do with that knowledge." This exchange revealed a crucial secret to Eliza. The association feared written evidence. Their careful avoidance of official records meant that Eliza's perfect memory was now their unintentional, unburnable archive, holding the precise details of every fraudulent transaction and destroyed life. Over the next 2 years, James Jr. used Eliza more openly. She heard Samuel Batson boast about systematically underpaying farmers using rigged scales. Jefferson Cunningham detailed how he structured loans for inevitable foreclosure, and Daniel Yatesman described destroying a political opponent with fabricated rumors. Elisa also witnessed the association coordinate the defeat of James Jr.'s sister, Catherine Harwell Morrison, who contested her father's will. Marcus Pedford managed the legal maneuvering, and Judge Thornton ensured the predetermined ruling, allowing James Jr. to inherit the entire $47,000 estate. Elisa, now 20, realized that the association's coordination was their structural weakness. Every man's secrets were entangled with the others. Exposing one thread would unravel the entire web. Eliza Harwell was legally worth $900 on the open market, but she possessed the knowledge to destroy 12 of the most powerful men in Middle Tennessee. The only remaining question was the survivable cost of using that power. The irreversible damage to the Springfield Association began in the spring of 1844 when James Harwell Jr. convinced four members, including Robert Killebrew and Edward Vance, to invest $20,000 in a fraudulent cotton futures speculation scheme. The money vanished, exposing James Jr.'s poor judgment and creating visible fractures within the association. Killebrew demanded immediate repayment and threatened to expose shared arrangements. Cornered and desperate, James Jr. made the catastrophic decision. He decided to sell Elisa South to Mississippi or Louisiana for $950, scheduled for Missoula, 1845. This would solve his immediate need for cash and eliminate the vulnerability of a young woman who knew too many secrets. Learning of the sale in November, Elisa had 8 months to secure her freedom. She approached the impossible task with methodical planning. First, she secretly taught herself to write using charcoal on boards and ash on hearthstones, achieving legible handwriting by March 80. Second, she identified an intermediary, Reverend Thomas Walsh, a respected circuit preacher from Nashville known for speaking out against moral corruption. When Walsh stayed at the Harwell plantation in May 1845, Eliza took an immense risk. She slipped an anonymous letter into his room, warning him of great corruption and offering detailed information from someone who had witnessed and can recount specific acts with complete accuracy. At dawn the next morning, Eliza met Walsh at the east boundary oak tree. Walsh was shocked to find an enslaved woman. When he questioned her extraordinary claim, Eliza replied with devastating precision. She perfectly recited his entire sermon from the previous Tuesday night, including the biblical quotes, the political metaphors, the specific examples of corruption, and the exact length of the sermon, 37 minutes. "I remember everything," Eliza stated. "Every conversation, every detail, every scheme these men have discussed in front of me because they assume enslaved people couldn't understand or remember." Walsh's face went pale. He knew instantly that her claim was not a lie. Reverend Walsh was visibly shaken after Elisa recited his 37-minute sermon verbatim, proving her memory was not fallible. Elisa posed the clear ultimatum. She knew 15 years of corruption, murders, thefts, and court manipulations and was willing to provide detailed, accurate testimony if someone could secure her legal freedom before her sale to Mississippi in 8 weeks. 5 days later, Elisa received a message through her mother. "The preacher believes you. Help is being arranged. Stay ready." Reverend Walsh had gone to Nashville, raising funds and coordinating with anti-slavery societies, attorneys, and journalists keen to challenge the power structures in counties like Robertson. On July 5, 1845, 2 days before Elisa was due to be handed over to the slave trader, an attorney named Samuel Porterfield, representing an anti-slavery society, appeared at the Harwell plantation. He offered $1,300 in cash for Eliza's immediate manumission, processing the papers through Davidson County Nashville courts to avoid Robertson County influence. James Jr., seeing only the immediate cash infusion needed to offset his disastrous investment losses, quickly agreed and signed the papers. Eliza Harwell became a legally free woman on July 12, 1845. She was immediately taken to Nashville and placed under the protection of a guardian, Mrs. Elizabeth Crane. The realization that they had lost control of their living archive swept through the Springfield Association like panic. At an emergency meeting on July 18th, the 12 men from Robert S. furious demands to Judge Thornton's assessment of their limited influence in Nashville under the truth spoken by Marcus Bedford. She asked legally free. She's under protection in Nashville and she knows everything. Buying her silence was impossible. Violence against a legally free woman was too risky. They were trapped by the very system they had corrupted, with no official records to prove their innocence. De Castillon. What do we do now? Hung in the air. The association was destroyed, even if they didn't know it yet. What followed over the next 3 years became known as the Robertson County cases, or the Springfield corruption scandal, beginning with Elisa's testimony in September 1845 in a property restoration case brought by Grace Thornhill's surviving children. The collapse of the Springfield Association began in September 1845 with the Thornhill property restoration case in Davidson County. The Thornhill heirs had no evidence, but Eliza Harwell provided it. She testified about the August 14, 1830, conversation with devastating precision, detailing how Marcus Pedford manufactured fraudulent debt documents and how Judge Thornton promised to validate the seizure without scrutiny. Defense attorneys strenuously objected to an enslaved person's testimony, but the objection was overruled as Elisa was legally free. When they challenged her perfect memory, the judge allowed her to demonstrate by reciting the opening statements of both attorneys verbatim. Court stenographers confirmed her accuracy was flawless, and her testimony, which included specific dates and financial amounts, was accepted. The court ruled the seizure fraudulent, and the land was restored to the Thornhill heirs. This was only the start. Funded by anti-slavery societies, lawyers filed 11 more cases against the association members through 1846. Elisa testified in all of them, systematically dismantling 2 decades of corruption. Edward Vance's land empire crumbled as properties were reclaimed, forcing him to flee to Texas by 1847, bankrupt and disgraced. Jefferson Cunningham resigned from the bank after Elisa exposed his fraudulent loan practices, and Samuel Batson's cotton gin was ruined by lawsuits from 37 farmers over rigged scales. James Harwell Jr.'s reckless decision to sell Elisa led to the foreclosure of the Harwell plantation in 1846. By he had lost his inheritance and was documented working as a clerk in Arkansas Territory. The legal battle culminated in a consolidated criminal trial in Nashville in May 1847. Eliza testified for 6 full days, enduring intense cross-examination. Despite defense attempts to discredit her memory and use her mismatched eyes to suggest instability, her perfect recall of specific conversations, dates, and names held up. The verdict resulted in Judge Benjamin Thornton being convicted of judicial misconduct and Marcus Pedford being dismissed. Though some wealthy men avoided prison time, the practical impact was absolute. The Springfield Association was utterly destroyed. Their financial empires were reduced to wreckage. Their power was broken, and their reputations were shattered. After the trials concluded in 1847, Eliza Harwell consciously retreated from public view. She never returned to Robertson County. Using the small funds she received, she established a modest, stable life in Nashville's free black community. In September 1849, she married David Porter, a freed carpenter, and they had 3 children who survived to adulthood. Census records list Elisa as a laundress, a domestic occupation that allowed her independence and avoided the white households where her history might be recognized. However, court records hint that her perfect memory continued to serve a purpose. She provided detailed, historical testimony in several Davidson County cases in the 1850s, always quietly, speaking only when necessary. The 12 families of the Springfield Association scattered and diminished, their names now synonymous with scandal. Edward Vance, James Harwell Jr., and others fled Tennessee entirely. The specific corruption exposed by Eliza did not immediately reform the entire system of inequality, but the public scandals served as a temporary deterrent to the old ways of coordinated crime. The physical evidence of Elisa's triumph was largely destroyed in the Robertson County Courthouse fire of 1891. The fire, believed by some historians to be incendiary, consumed the West Wing, destroying detailed trial transcripts and depositions containing damaging information about families whose descendants still held influence. The scandal faded into a local legend occurs brought upon 12 families by a woman with mismatched eyes. Elisa herself left no memoir or personal account, choosing to look forward rather than back. She died in Nashville on August 14, 1873, at the age of 49, and was buried in a now unidentifiable grave in the city cemetery. Her legacy remains in the hidden corners of history. A woman who needed no curses or supernatural power, only memory, patience, courage, and the opportunity to finally speak the truth, with a precision that could not be dismissed. The story concludes by emphasizing the breathtaking simplicity of the Springfield Association's destruction, an empire built on lies, corruption, and the arrogant assumption of invincibility was brought down by a single source: memory and truth. The men who believed their power made them untouchable learned that Eliza Harwell, the woman they had owned, dismissed, and tried to silence, was, in the end, the instrument of their complete destruction. The narrative suggests that the true curse was simply the consequences of powerful men speaking freely in the presence of someone they wrongly assumed was incapable of understanding, remembering, or testifying. Memory proved more powerful than influence. Truth proved more destructive than any curse. And sometimes, justice arrives, not through armies or laws, but through a single voice finally given the chance to speak truth. What do you think about this story? Do you believe everything happened as described? Or are there still secrets buried in Robertson County that historians haven't uncovered? Leave your comment below, sharing your thoughts. If you enjoyed this dark chapter of American history and want more mysteries like this, subscribe to The Forgotten Liturgy, hit the notification bell, and share this video with someone who loves historical mysteries.